She recording?
She is.
She has a gender.
An agenda? I have an agenda.
You know the way your dad say, she's a good car.
Here, fuck off, will you? Fresh, yeah?
Shut the fuck up!
Welcome back after a hiatus.
A hiatus.
A hiatus. They actually have loads of hiatuses in Australia. You don't see them here anymore. Toyota hiatus. Don't think they're called hiatus over there. We've had a hiatus for about 6 or 7 weeks. I might have been in Australia, in Alice Springs. I was in Sydney for a couple of days as well. And I had an amazing experience. I was down there with college, Maynooth College. I went down to do a 6 weeks placement in a youth centre down there, working with Aboriginal young people. I was there as an observer, which was very, very strange for me then, because normally I just get in, and start doing the youth work, which I did do, of course. But I was there as an observer, and I had to look at practice and make an observation on it, So I also did I volunteered in a radio station there. Well, I wouldn't say volunteered, but I kind of helped out and recorded a podcast of the 4 people that were down there from Maynooth.
What was the name of the podcast?
I sent it to you. I called it 4 Dubs and Alice. You said it sounded like a porno.
It does sound like a porno.
I sent it to a few people and they said, yeah, it does. 4 Dubs and Alice.
So welcome back, episode 19, the Fresh Batch podcast.
Yeah, I missed the podcast and doing them and expressing myself and all that kind of stuff, But I had a different experience. I was very quiet down there. I wasn't as loud as I am. I wasn't as expressive as I am. I was kind of sitting back and observing and taking stuff in and watching and listening, and I was very much connected with nature, Alice Springs is built along a creek, the Todd River, which was dry for 99% of the time I was there, and then it flooded twice when I was there. And they say if you see it flooded 3 times in your lifetime, you're a local.
You won't live.
And a lot of people went to Alice Springs by accident kind of thing, like for work or something like that, and stayed. A lot of people stay there because it's a very unique place. It's like, it's hard to kind of explain without being there. It's not like anywhere else I've been in Australia. It is a country town. So there's a lot of, that kind of, where you have people who are living in the bush or living outside of the town come into the town. So you have that community. Then you have a white community who live in the town. And they have a culture. They have a way of being. And then you have black culture. You have Aboriginal culture. And then you have this other thing, which is like Dublin. You have the diversity. You have Indians, Bangladeshis, you have Africans, you have all different cultures there as well, So it's quite a menagerie of different cultures, A lot of it, just exists, just kind of happens. So as an observer, I was watching it going, this is weird. Like you would see different kind of cultures, existing together, Yeah. It was difficult for me in the first week to kind of, like culture shock they call it, And I just think you're out of your routine, you're jet lagged. A lot of the stuff is the same, A lot of the food is the same. There's pizza and...
Yeah, so the culture shock wouldn't be as much as if you were dropped in the middle of India.
And yeah, I'd say there's a McDonald's in Alice Springs. They don't have Burger King, they have Hungry Jack's, but it's the same thing. 2023 world culture there's a lot of it. There's not very, very many places that are completely unique. And I'm sure there are, but they're very, very, they're very hard to get to. When you go out into the bush, there's shops out there and they sell Omo washing powder, so you're not kind of completely cut off from society or whatever. There is a distance, of course. But nearly every day in a sushi bar, mainly because sushi suits me the way you get it is in small portions, and I eat small portions. So I would have had to, but then I was thinking one day, I'm in the middle of the desert here, where's this fish coming from,
I was like that in South Africa. So you'd be 2,000 kilometres from the sea and you're going, how the fuck does this fish get here? It's obviously transported and frozen.
I would have had a lot of contact with Aboriginal people, and like they go out hunting at the weekends, and they'll hunt kangaroo, and they'll cook the kangaroo in their traditional way there, and then they'll dig a hole and they make a fire and they cook the kangaroo in there, and they'll eat that till it's gone. You know, there's no waste on it.
What are you hunting with?
Rifles. One of the lads was telling me, one of the Aboriginal guys, Damien, was saying that they go out there with their uncle, you know, and their culture is very respectful of their elders, you know, and so they would respect their uncle. They would listen to him. But they were out one day, and there was 2 hunting implements leaning against a tree, and their uncle said they could be there 200 years, or they could be there 2,000 years, you know. And he said white people had passed them, and he wouldn't even give them a second glance, like, you know. And he said, I just know what they are. And he said, we won't touch them, we won't disturb them, because they've been there for a long time, you know. And even that, you know, the whole thing about what's going on about, you know, Greece is asking London for their monuments back, like, you know, that was stolen from them, you know.
The antiquities or the
antiquities and stuff like that, you know.
Yeah, the gems and all that.
And I was reading then that there's like in Italy somewhere you look through a glass floor in a McDonald's and there's an ancient grave there, and you're kind of thinking, is that respectful? Like, you know, is that, you know, see, I started to think about museums and things like that, you know, and started to think about that way, you know, in the past, you wouldn't have seen an Aboriginal shield, okay, because it was just so difficult to get to Australia. So people would have brought them to Ireland, and we would have had them in the museum, and you would have got to see something up close. Whereas nowadays, like, I was away for 6 weeks, and I think I spoke to my parents like 3 or 4 times a week. You know, so you don't, when people left Ireland in the 1800s and all that, they had a wake for them, you know, they had an American wake, because they would have never seen those people or spoke to those people.
We had a party
again.
when you left.
I'd say it did. But I had a party in my head when I left, because it all happened very quickly, the opportunity to go to Alice Springs, you know, and I just remember we were recording a podcast and you said, buy the ticket. And that's just what I did. I just went with it. I just leaned into it and said, I'm going to do this. And it happened. And there was days when I was, like I stayed in a house on the east side of Alice Springs with a Bangladeshi family. I was the tenant, you know. So I was completely not in my normal mode, like, you know. And I had to be respectful. I had to wait my turn to use the bathroom and all that kind of stuff, like, you know. I was thinking, how did this happen, you know? Why is this happening? But the learning about myself and about being with myself and about understanding myself, you know, because I was watching different cultures, like, you know, I was watching people doing different things, you know, and halfway through all of it, I went, shit, that's none of my business. I'll be gone out of here in 3 weeks' time, and they'll never, you know, this is none of my business, you know, and that was hard to
like
accept.
what?
Like the way people behave around different cultures, you know. You know, I was very angry when I went there and I was reading the history of Australia, you know, and of Captain Cook arriving, and, you know, even up until a couple of weeks before I went there, they had a vote on The Voice, you know, to give Aboriginal people a voice, you know. And Aboriginal people in Australia are very, very disconnected from, you know, white culture, you know. It's very, very different, you know.
And vice versa.
Yeah, and they live, so the white people will live around the coast, you know, and that's the rich areas. And then in where I was, in the bush and in the middle part is very poor. Now,
so that's what I was going to ask, sorry, what would have attracted people to white people to Alice Springs?
Well, there was explorers, and here's the funny thing, like, there was people in Alice Springs for 30,000 years before white people arrived there, you know.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. The Aboriginal people, that was where they were, creeks and springs and all that type of stuff. What would have attracted the white, say, European settlers?
Well, land. Now,
well, there's fucking plenty. There's plenty of land.
So that's what they want. I mean, that's the way white people think. You know, we think of, you know, acquiring land. When Aboriginal people lived in Australia, they didn't. The same with Native American people. They didn't own land because the land was just the land, like, you know.
Yeah, but going to Alice Springs, kind of like the analogy or the Comparison would be South Africa, that for some reason they stopped in Johannesburg, and that reason was gold and diamonds.
Yeah.
Why did they stop in Alice Springs? Because there was a spring there.
There was a spring there. So the history, I think, is that this guy Todd and a guy Sturt, they were kind of the explorers. So there's monuments to these people. Like, there's no monuments to Aboriginal people, and they don't want it either, because when an Aboriginal person dies, their memory is forgotten. Like, they don't speak their name again. Bit like traveller culture here years ago. When a traveller died, they would burn their possessions and burn their wagon and that kind of stuff. And it's very, very similar. So why did white people go there? So there was explorers. They have this monument. They had to cover it over because it was getting vandalized so much. Did they call these people pioneers? Like, they were just people, but they just had a different skin colour. By having a skin colour, they're rewarded as pioneers, But there was people there for 30,000 years.
Yeah, it's like the frontier people in American history.
Yeah, there was always people in America. There was native people who lived there, and they called that land Turtle Island, But it was only when Europeans went there that they, in inverted commas, discovered it. What do you mean they discovered it? It was always there. It was like, do you know the way the joke was years ago? What was the highest mountain in the world before Everest was discovered? Everest. It was just, you know what I mean? It's not because it's discovered. Temperature isn't temperature because they made a thermometer. Temperature is temperature. It's, it's always been there, like, not always. I mean, obviously the world was created many, many, many millions of years ago, depending on what religion you have.
I love the way your shoebox of a brain just keeps on folding out.
Well, imagine being in here looking out there, and that's the great thing, is that because of, I talk about recovery, and because of, the last 4 years, I've really, really, that shoebox or that thing that just keeps opening, it just keeps giving. I just going into deeper thinking, and it's mad, it's great. And I laugh at myself a lot more now, about the way I thought in the past. And like, I remember one time I got a skip, right? A friend of mine had a skip company, and he said, I'll drop you up a skip. I'll give you a skip for 200 quid. And he dropped this big, huge skip. You would have filled the factory of it, like, And I went out and I cleared out the attic and I cleared out the shed. And I remember thinking, who was I? There's all these lamps and different things and just rubbish.
All the artifacts.
And I was like, who was I then? Who, how does this relate to me? None of this stuff relates to me now, And I remember throwing it out and getting rid of it. And I think there's also a part of that, like, about a lot of people live in the past. You look at Facebook and they're like Dublin in their rare old times, and they talk about, they put up these posts saying life was better then, and you're like, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But the reality is that ain't now, because now is now. And you can think about the past all you want, and you can live in the past all you want, but the reality is now is now. I'd often think about the way I thought about stuff in the past, and then you hear people talking about, we say, like I'm studying youth and community work, and they'd say, well, that was the method we used in the past, or that was an old way of thinking or something like that, And yet we'll also look at, like, when I was looking at Aboriginal culture, which is very, very, very different to me, and the way that they interact with the world and the earth, and that they spoke about it as fact, to me, was very, very strange, And I just had to realise it's none of my business.
I remember being in the bush in South Africa, and one of the guys there, he was describing the habits of an elephant.
Right.
But he used the elephant, he said, I.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he was saying, I do this and I do that, but he was talking about the elephant. And it's solidified in my head the idea of I and I.
Yeah.
The way I see it is that we're all one, that it's all I. Yes, there's physical separation in form. You know what I mean? You have a different form over there than I have.
Yeah.
But when we all go back to fucking Turtle Island or whatever it is,
yeah,
it's all I.
And the other thing then is that like what we think in our heads about ourselves isn't necessarily true. And it's when we start to observe ourselves and to start to observe our actions and our... So I'll give you an example, right? So there was a lawn sale one day in Alice Springs, right? And I went up and I wanted to buy a radio off a guy because radio is me hobby, you know? And he had this little walkie-talkie radio thing, you know? I have one here with me today. And but I wanted to buy this and he wanted $50 for it, you know, whatever it was, right? And in my mind, I started to judge him, right? And I started to think, he's ripping me off. This thing doesn't even work, right? You know, and all that kind of stuff, right? And I went into a whole method of thinking that has served me, I think, for 50 odd years, right? Which is survival. And then I realised that it was all a load of cod because he actually wasn't trying to rip me off. He was actually bang on. He actually convinced me not to buy the radio because it was useless in Ireland.
He was a fucking Jedi.
He was deadly, like, you know, but what happened was I had a great chat with him and he's a white Australian and I was asking him about Australia and he, you know, he grew up in Australia and stuff like that and what that was like. And a lot of people who went to Australia in 67, and I think they're called 67ers, there's a you know, group of people that arrived. You think you could buy your passage to Australia for a tenner back in 67. A lot of Scottish people, a lot of people from the north went. You know, during the Troubles and stuff like that, there was opportunities given to people and a lot of people left. But a lot of those people became very, very wealthy through hard work. So there's a lot of wealth there, you know, like it's a different type of wealth to here, like, you know, and people will have big properties and stuff like that and they drive big Jeeps and utes and all that kind of stuff, and they don't live to work, they work to live. So they'll spend a lot of time out and they'll have their utility vehicles and all that kind of stuff, and they'll go out to the bush at the weekend and they'll do their barbecues and all that kind of stuff. And they have... So
other than the barbecue, we have a lot of that here, a lot of wealth and a lot of people driving around in big vehicles.
Yes, there is. I know, but I'm just saying a lot of the white people would be rich, you know, a lot of them. And so the people who are coming from different countries, like America or like here, they have a couple of jobs and they don't have that family backup that a lot of the white Australians would have, you know. But then the Aboriginal people are poor. A lot of them are poor. You know, most of them are poor. Some of them would have land rights and stuff like that and would make money from that. And some of them are cowboys, you know. Like you'd be in Alice Springs and you'd see a full-blown cowboy walking towards you with the boots and the jeans and the hat and the shirt, and they kind of had their own bar. There was a bar that they all drank in. So they're horse people. They would be kind of working on the horse ranches, you know.
They white people or Aboriginal?
Aboriginals. They would have cars and, you know, stuff like that. Then you see Aboriginal people and they're walking around barefoot, like, you know. So there's an apartheid as such, you know, because Aboriginals don't have a voice, you know what I mean? And that's what the voice was about, was giving these people a voice.
Explain that, the voice.
So the voice was a piece of legislation that would give Aboriginal people a voice in Congress.
Referendum?
So referendum. And so I think people weren't shocked that it was voted down, but I think people were shocked at how severely it was voted down. You know, there was only one territory, which was Canberra, that voted for it. But the rest of Australia thinks of Canberra as like a hippie commune or something like that, you know.
Oh, it's a bit lefty liberally.
Yeah.
That's the capital city, is it?
Yeah, and that's where like weed is legal there and, you know, stuff like that. So it's that kind of a place, like, you know.
This wasn't the first time that this referendum was voted on. It's had different versions of it.
Well, you see, the thing is that they've revoked lots of laws around Aboriginal people. Like before I went there, Alice Springs was a dry town, you know. They had banned drinking. And if you or me wanted to go to buy a bottle of beer in the off license, you had to bring ID with you. And then your name would then be put into a computer. So if you went in and you bought beer on Monday and then you went in on Wednesday, there's a chance you wouldn't be served. And there's 2 police in the bottle shop looking after this system, like, you know. They have police over there. They're actually present, you know, not like Ireland, 4 police for the whole country, you know. it's quite authoritarian society, like, you know. And
How long was it dry?
What you mean?
You said it was a dry town.
It was dry. Now, there are dry communities around Alice Springs that have been dry for 20, 30
And we don't
years.
mean lack of rainwater dry.
No, dry as an alcohol dry. So that would be... So there's law, and then there's Aboriginal law. Like, you know, they have their own law. So they will make places that they live, communities that they live in, as dry places, and people don't drink alcohol in those towns and communities. And then there are communities that are not dry. Yeah,
So you were saying Alice Springs, before you got there, was dry.
I don't know how long it was dry for, but alcohol was banned. And then what happened was
When you arrived.
the grog. No, this is before. There was alcohol there when I arrived, and for sale. But what happened was that whole Al Capone thing, started happening, where people were brewing up their own gargle, and they were driving to Adelaide and bringing up van loads of gargle and stuff like that. So, you know yourself, when human beings, when they have a need, they respond to it, like,
Do you call it the grog?
But that's what they call it, grog. So you'd be going through areas and they would say grog free zone. There'd be a sign up saying grog free zone.
When I was in Liverpool, they'd call it the grog shop.
The grog shop, yeah, the bottle shop, or the bottle, they call it over there, And it's, I think alcohol as a substance it's an issue in lots of countries, and it's certainly an issue down there. And there's all kinds of reasons as to why Aboriginal people drink so much. I believe it's the same reason why we drink so much.
Colonisation,
loss of language. Now, they still have their languages. Like, I was talking to one young person one day, and he's chatting to his mates in their language, and I said to him, "Is that your first language?" And he goes, "Yes." And I said, "How many languages have you got?" And he says, "Well, English is my 5th language." So they don't have the loss of language the way we have, And I know there's a big rejuvenation of Irish language in Ireland now, They have the loss of their culture, and
Yeah, well, theirs was lost because of the laws that it was illegal to speak Irish.
Yeah. We had Brehon law, and then we had penal laws. Yeah, when we were invaded, when we were colonised. So I was talking to an Aboriginal guy down there. He was a great guy, and I was saying to him, I was actually asked him to do a podcast with me, which never happened. But he was saying, "Why would I do a podcast with you?" And I said, "Well, our history is so similar, And he was going, "No, it's not." And I was like, "No, it is." And he said, "Explain it to me." And I says, "Well, we were colonised." I said, our resources was completely stripped. The whole country was covered in forest. I said it was completely, taken down. I says, they starved us. They shipped food out under guard while people were dying. I says we had to emigrate.
On Gortamore,
the Great Hunger. And so I kind of explained, and I said, and he says, "Well, we're still occupied." And I says, "Well, so are we." And he didn't know any of this.
It's kind of like, I was looking at a video earlier on today about Celtic Football Club. I think he was Palestinian. And he was going, what's the story here with this football club and its relationship to Ireland, and then its relationship to Palestine? The local lads were explaining it to him. They were just saying, look, here's our relationship with Ireland. We set up this, or a priest set up this club to feed people who were coming over from on Gortamore from the famine over to Scotland. The money from the club would be used, the money from the tickets would be used to feed these people. Yeah, there was colonisation and there was oppression. That's similar to what has been going on in Palestine for the last 75 years. And he said there's so many things that we have in common, that in relationship the story is so similar.
Just to say to people there who are listening and are interested in this, there is a film on Vimeo called Utopia. Utopia.
Not Utopia.
See, I said that with the Australian. When I was out there, I had to change the way I spoke. I'll give you an example. Every morning I used to go over to the shopo and get a breakfast smoothie, And I used to get this coffee called a dirty chai. Now you understand what I'm talking about there, right? But if I went up to the counter and I said, "Give us a dirty chai, please," she'd say, "You lost a child?" Sorry? What happened? So dirty chai. So I had to go over to the shop and say every morning, how you going? Can I have a dirty chai, please?
No way.
to.
Fuck off.
I had to.
You don't just write it down and go, dirty chai, and then they show the sign.
They didn't even have a dirty chai on the menu. I heard a woman, an Irish woman, asking for one day, and I said to her, "What is that?" And she goes, "It's a cappuccino with a shot of chai in it." I said, "Give us a taste of that," and I loved it. It's kind of cinnamony, you know. I used to go and ask for it, and they'd be saying that to me. "You've lost a child?" And I'd be like, no, a dirty chai. And they were like, "We don't sell that. I don't know what you're talking about." So eventually then, in certain, like 3, you have to say 3. I had to say 3.
Yeah, as a survival strategy.
As a survival strategy. And if I said 4, they thought I was saying 5. So I had to put my fingers up and go, 4.
That's what I'm saying, write it down.
4, and you had to do it. Like, if you didn't, you wouldn't survive. So you have to change and you have to adapt. And here's the thing. If people were coming into this country and they wouldn't speak the way we speak, if they started to speak in Italian or something like that, you know, we'd be like, they won't even learn the language. So you have to adapt, you have to change. And although it was very challenging for me, and this is what I'm talking about me learning about my ego and about, you know, that hurt me, you know what I mean? I was like, I have to change to be, you know, and I was the foreigner.
You're changing, Sparky.
But I am changing, thanks be to God. But I was the foreigner.
Even amongst the black Aboriginals, the white Irish fella was the foreigner.
Well, they actually said to me one day, right? One of them called me, I won't tell you what he called me, but he called me white.
Tell us, go on.
He called me a white prick. He called me a white prick. And I said, I'm not white, I'm Irish. And they asked me to say it every day. Say that again. Say that again.
What was that in the commitments? The Irish are the blacks
that's right.
of Europe.
There you go. Wow, that's a great.
The Irish are the blacks. Let's say the Irish are the blacks of Europe. Dubliners are the blacks of Ireland. The North Side Dubliners are the blacks of Dublin. So let's be black and be proud.
So I said to them, I'm not white, I'm Irish, and they thought this was hilarious. So
do you think that white is an attitude or a
colour,
culture or a colour?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. It's all of the above, you know. So I remember,
is white a history?
So I remember being invited up to the bookshop one day for a book launch, and it was these older white people who had been in Alice Springs for years, and they loved Alice Springs, and they were great people, like, you know. But it was completely different to the culture 50 metres outside. You know, there was women who sat on the ground and sold their paintings, like, you know, and black Aboriginal women who sold their paintings. It was a completely different culture, you know, and it was, the best way to describe it is lasagna. So you have a layer of black Aboriginal people, and you have whatever, you know, they do, and then you have the layer of white settlers around wherever they do, and then you have the layer of new cultures, you know, Indians, Bangladeshi, African, Russian, all those, you know, groups of people there, you know.
There's a lot of similarities to South Africa because, yeah, they would have whites, they would have blacks
and colours,
and they'd have them living like separated by a wall, like the Palestine wall, or like the wall up walls up in Belfast. It's fucking really interesting. Or like the walls here, like the wall down in Sheriff Street that separates the corporations from the corpo.
Look at the wall here.
What's the wall here?
50 yards away from this building, there's a wall that we had in Ballymun that separated Glasnevin from Ballymun.
The travellers from the settled community.
Travellers choose to live amongst themselves, right? That's their choice, right? They choose to live.
Some of them
do, yeah, of course, yeah. But travellers in general, I think, they want to live, you know, together in their family. So that's a choice, right? Now you're right. There is white. Travellers are white as well. There is Irish people.
Travellers are Irish people as well.
There are. There you go. Hold on. Rewind this now. What the fuck?
Fucking no. This is a good one.
This is a good one. So
because the people in Glasnevin choose to be there as well.
Yes. But there are the people in Glasnevin, and I'm not slagging people in Glasnevin because people in Ballymun do this as well, but people build walls. And I think, right, so I'm not judging anybody, right? I think the human race are mental because we build walls. Like the Berlin Wall was real. It was real in my lifetime, in your lifetime.
It was also psychological.
And it was psychological too. And then you have the walls in Belfast, and I've seen those walls, and I've actually crossed over them.
And ironically, Or maybe not ironically, they're called the peace walls.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're sometimes the points of most...
Their interfaces, those, they would have
sometimes
been... They would have been
the point
interfa-
of most tension.
Yes, absolutely.
Where the peace
yeah.
wall is. That's a fucking interesting concept. The point of most tension is where the peace walls are.
There were flashpoints and stuff like that. But I remember doing the tour with college this year, and we done this is what I was talking about, the flags. You know, remember I was saying about when I see a tricolour in the north, I feel okay. And then when I turn the corner and I see a Union Jack, my psyche changes, like my fear changes, like, you know. And I remember going from Falls Road into the Shankill, and Patter, the guy from the Falls side, who gave his history, you know, which was that he was a prisoner in the maze and all that kind of stuff, and he had been a member of the IRA and stuff, and how different that was to our group. Like, they were shocked, you know. And then we went over into the Shank, right? Now, the one thing was, the Falls Road side was all developed, and you went into the Shank and it was derelict. Like, there was dereliction, you know. It was unreal. And a lot of that for me had got to do with their leaders, because their leaders seemed to be more caught up in defending the union than actually building the community, like,
or defending the 32 county socialist republic.
Yes, well, on the other side, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where there would be dereliction. I remember talking to Jerry Adams and Mary Lou about that, and I was saying, yeah, but meanwhile, 20% of all the homeless people in the city are from my community, and they don't give a fucking rat's about the 32 county socialist republic.
Yeah.
So whose priority are we working off here?
Yeah, and the thing is that we have to engage those people to become interested in a republic that they are part of, you know. And
You have to engage what people?
those homeless people that you're talking about, right?
Or
And
vice versa, you have to engage those Republicans to engage in homelessness and housing.
instead of people being subservient or whatever you want to call it, right? Okay, to receive welfare and to be on lists and to be all that kind of stuff, right? To actually engage them. Like, I would love there to be a socialist, a 32 county socialist republic. I'd love that. But it's a bit of a dream. It's a pipe dream, because the country I live in and the people that I live amongst are very conservative, you know, and they have their Range Rover Jeeps, but they never drive them through muck. You know what I mean? They buy these big, huge cars for driving up the side of a mountain, right? That's built to drive up the side of a mountain. You know, a Range Rover or a big Pajero. I don't know.
Oh, I seen a thing in America where they had them and they were getting the muck sprayed on artificially in a garage.
You're messing.
No, serious, 100%. So the point I was trying to make was that you were saying that the other group of people weren't, there was dereliction, but their focus was on the union.
Yeah.
And I was comparing that to the focus on a 32 county socialist republic here, but there's dereliction.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So both of those people in power are playing the same game, while the powerless are destitute.
But you see, the powerless aren't really powerless, right? Here's the thing, right? It's the agreement. It's what you know the way when people go, I see them politicians up in Leinster House or something like that. It's like as if they are not part of us, you know. But the reality is that they are the same, you know. They're just elected to do a job, you know, and then when they're elected to do that job, they have to work a system that has existed in Ireland way before.
Yeah, well, let's expand it out further in Ireland and let's go back to the Aboriginals, where they have their voice or their lack of voice, because they're all the same as well. Or are they? Are the whites and the Aboriginals?
Are they the same?
Are they the same?
The same race of people, yeah, of course. But do they have the same equality of opportunity? No. The outcome for an Aboriginal person is very, very different than the outcome for a white person. So in Dublin, the outcome for somebody from Ballymun is quite different than the outcome for somebody from Foxrock. And a lot of that has got to do with the agreement. And I remember reading an article about this woman in America who said that Ireland, England, America, and all those different countries, we have a caste system. Like, we would look at India and say, oh, the caste system is terrible, like, you know, but we have a caste system that we agree to. So I would agree that I'm not part of the middle classes. So when I go into their societies, when we go and meet Fifi playing the piano up in Blackrock, up in Dundalk, we say to ourselves, we don't fit in here. we're not part of this because we feel uncomfortable. They're not the same. The language isn't the same. The phrases aren't the same.
The culture isn't the same.
The culture isn't the same. The houses, the wealth, it's all different. So we don't feel comfortable. We feel comfortable in the corpo we stay with the rope around the lamppost and singing Ring a Ring a Rosie and all that kind of stuff, right? That's where we feel comfortable. And that's in a sense, when I was talking about Dublin in the rare old times, people will feel comfortable. The nostalgia will be for a simpler time and that kind of stuff. And it's got to do with how we as human beings believe, that we believe that we are a certain caste.
So do you think poverty is a belief?
Absolutely.
Do you?
Absolutely.
It's a state of mind.
It's a state of mind that that has existed for...
So can you think your way over?
No, I don't mean in that way. Sorry, no. I think people can... I'm at the buying the lotto. I bought a lotto ticket yesterday. I could be rich tomorrow, but I will still have poverty of education, poverty of all those different things.
Poverty of thinking.
Poverty of, my ancestor. So I think back, hundreds of years ago, when people looked at the Brits here and they bowed down in front of them and they, oh, my lord, the lord of the mansion, that kind of stuff. And they felt and believed that they were lower in a caste. I think that has carried down through my ancestors into our belief system. And you'd be told as a kid when somebody was a Protestant, oh, they're Protestants. They're Protestants, or that family's Protestant.
So you believe yourself to be subservient or inferior?
Or different.
Yeah, different, but different in a inferior way. You don't believe yourself to be...
Oh, there's the other thing, and that's the one thing that would get me when I meet people who are from a different class, and I'd say, they have a superiority complex. Well, maybe they don't. Maybe it's me that has the inferiority complex, and they're just doing their thing. But I do think that wealth gives people a better opportunity of outcome. And that's the way it is in Australia. That's the way it is in the communities where Aboriginal people is. Their opportunity of outcome is very, very less than ours. So for me, right, as a working class man, white man, in my wealth that I have, like a house, I was even thinking this yesterday. I nearly owned a house in Ballymun, right, through a community cooperative, okay? But that makes me wealthy in this country because my brother, who's 20 years younger than me, doesn't have an opportunity to own his own house. And even if he set up a cooperative, he still doesn't have an opportunity to own his own house because of the price of...
Because when you bought your house, it was like 3 times your annual wage. Now it's about 7 times your annual wage. Yeah. But also, the accessibility to money was easier then. You could get a mortgage that was approximately 5 times. The banking regulations were different then. They were almost posting you out an approved mortgage.
Oh, look, you could get a mortgage with €2 in the bank.
You could get 110% mortgage. I got a letter approved. I got 110% approved mortgage without even applying for the fucking mortgage. This is like 30 years ago. I could get up to something like 5 times my annual wage, which could get you a gaff. So say if you were on 40 grand a year, you could get a gaff that was 200 grand a year.
Yes.
But now, if you're on 50 grand a year, you can only get a gaff that's 150 grand a year because of the 3 times.
Yeah, so a friend of ours has been approved a mortgage recently, and it's 250. That's just not in Dublin. What gaff's for sale for 250?
Mary Lou was talking to you today. She said she would like the affordable housing price to be €350,000. That's the starting price for affordable houses. It's
affordable, and our mate only got approved for 250, so he's still out of that. And I think, how does that get fixed? Is it through voting? You know what I mean? Like I'm hearing people saying that they're going to try and start a campaign before the next election. I'm not sure whether the next election is local but they're going to start a campaign before the next general election to get young people to vote, right?
It's something that we've chatted about for a long time in communities like this, say working class communities. They haven't associated voting with their own power or their own future.
But a lot of people from areas like this are beaten down, and they don't feel that their voice is important, or they think that they'll vote on a Monday and on a Wednesday they will have the gaffer. And if it's not, then they get really angry towards the system, That's my experience of it. I also think there's a lot of people without addresses. They can't register at certain addresses because they're under the radar or they're homeless or whatever it is.
I think you can use, if you're homeless, if you're rough sleeping, you can use a GPO. And if you're staying in a hostel, you can use the hostel address.
So, Dean, you're homeless. Get yourself into your head now and get homeless into your head and sleep under the canopy in the Savoy. And a fella comes up to you and says to you, if you want to vote tomorrow, go over and sign on the GPO.
Yeah, now
is it your priority?
Yeah, but numbers-wise, there's like in Dublin, aside from the 300 and odd immigrants who are now sleeping in tents, in Dublin there's probably 200 rough sleepers.
Right.
Those other people who are homeless, the majority of homeless people aren't out on the streets. They're in
hostels,
emergency accommodation, Dublin City Council, hotels, B&Bs. And so on. And you can use that address for voting. So would it be our priority? No, it absolutely wouldn't. But just like you were saying that a lot of people here wouldn't vote because they feel voiceless and so on, it's not our priority. They're surviving on a day by day or week by week mentality because they feel inferior or in the poverty trap or subservient or pointless or whatever.
In the caste system, they're the lowest people on the caste system, yeah.
But they do have daily conversations about other stuff. And it sounds like there's a possibility if we get the right messaging out there that we could inject voting as part of those daily conversations that people have.
Yeah, and I think, look, let's do it, right? Because if it gets one more person to vote, great. I don't think, my gut feeling is that there has been lots of campaigns to get people to vote. I think there was one...
Rock the vote.
Yeah, but there has always been loads of campaigns, and I don't think it has been hugely successful.
I think on that, it hasn't been hugely successful. If it's been successful at all, if one person has voted, using your words, it's a success. It hasn't become part of the culture. So let's see what we can do to make it, to aim it in that direction where it might become part of the culture.
Well, I've one solution for it. In Australia, you have to vote. It's illegal not to vote.
Oh, that's a good one. If you want to get your dole, you have to vote.
And where'd you get that from?
Because in my head, in communities like this, working class communities, where you have a high dependency on social welfare, you also have a low turnout for voting. That's where I got it from.
No, I know that. And that's one of those funny things that, that I was talking about, that when you get into quietness, you get into that, you start to look at your attitudes and stuff like that. That's not the law in Australia. You're just fined if you don't vote. You don't lose your dole, or you don't.
There's a fine. It's not illegal. Is it? You say it was illegal?
It's illegal. You're fined if you don't vote. Majority of people vote, and people who disagree with it just spoil their vote.
Would the Aboriginal people be registered to vote?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
Absolutely. So the thing is, everyone is registered to vote. But here, let me just give you this. It doesn't change anything, really, Still the majority in Australia, they voted, even though every Aboriginal person voted for the voice, it was outstandingly voted against. So
is that a numbers game, though?
I don't think that if everybody in these areas voted, I don't think it would change a goddamn thing. I don't think it would change.
I would think that it would. I would think that what we've had in this country for 100 years is the same parties, Conservative, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael parties, ruling the roost.
Yeah.
We haven't had a traditional centrist or left-wing party ever.
So me and you would love a left-wing government, right? And we would love for housing, and we would love for better education, and we would love for better health. We're in the minority. That's not what people want. What people want is more wealth, more opportunities for their people. They don't want any travellers living next door to them. They don't want anybody on social welfare living in their apartment blocks. That's what the majority of people in this country want. So we're not just part of that culture then. We don't live among them, so we don't think like that. We think because we're community workers, we work in the community, we come from that way of thinking, which is equality, equity of outcome, all that kind of stuff. That's the way we think. We're very unique. You know what I mean? We're not the majority, Dean. You know, the majority of people want their kids to do well. They want their families to do well.
I think everyone wants their kids to do well and their families to do well.
Okay, but in this community and where we were reared, the community reared a kid. You know what I mean? We were all part of
we
the
probably rely on or see the value of community more than others.
And the less money that people have, the more community minded they are. So when you go into the Aboriginal communities in...
Say that again, the less what?
The less money people have, the more community minded they are.
Right, okay, yeah.
And so that's when you look at those Dublin in the rare old times, they'll talk about things were better even though we had less, people were more family orientated and stuff like that, and you heard Irene, when Irene was on, she was talking about in the tenement buildings, her father would come in with a wrap of grub for the woman upstairs, like, you know what I mean? People looked out for people. What happens now is that people close the doors, like, you know what I mean? In those
areas, what areas are you talking about?
In middle class areas and upper class areas. They're not the same as us here.
So hold on, let's spread this out. Do you think that there's more middle class and upper class people than there are?
I haven't done the sum, so I couldn't answer that question.
I don't think there is.
Okay.
Do you think that the last time we had a big vote in this country, it was quite close?
There was a big swing for Sinn Féin, but Sinn Féin aren't a kick in the arse away from Fianna Fáil or Fianna Gael in terms of big politics, right? So in terms of what we want is quite left wing.
I don't know what you think we want.
Well, what you're talking about in terms of housing, right? We're in the minority for who wants that.
That we want affordable housing less than 400 grand.
That we want people housed. That there's an opportunity that the government builds houses. So back in...
Do you think the majority of people in this country don't want the government to build houses?
Absolutely.
I don't think that's the truth.
I think that they feel that people living in social housing are getting free gaffs that they're paying for. I've heard people saying that. Like, I've heard, I've been at family gatherings and stuff like that, and I've heard people saying that. So for me, who's kind of coming from, dare I say, a communist way of thinking, which is that everyone is equal, everybody gets the same. Some people would call it socialist. I don't think the majority of people in this country think like me. In fact, I'd say there's about 100 people think like me. You know what I mean? In that sense, right? If you look at any of the experiments around communism in the world, it never worked because there was always people wanting to be better or to be more or to have more or whatever it is. Capitalism is quite threatened by that. And capitalism is a huge influence,
Capitalism is the big agreement.
Is the big agreement, yeah. Well, so is communism is a big agreement. They're all agreements.
Yeah, but like the one that is the status quo is definitely not communism.
The majority of the world is capitalism, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't get the whole thing about the equality of outcome. I kind of don't understand how it all works, but also it's not... I don't have a firm stamp belief in all that type of stuff.
So do you believe that if you send a young person from Ballymun to college, an 18-year-old to college, straight out of Outreach or whatever it is, right, and a young person then who's been to school in St. Fintan's of Sutton or something like that, do you think they have the same outcome? Do you have the same...
They don't have the same outcome now.
So that's what that's about.
What do you mean that's what that's about?
So you would have to support the person from Ballymun more, which means that person gets more to create an equality of outcome.
Yeah, that bit there, that's where I get a little bit lost with it. You can support people more, but their outcome is undeterminable.
Of course, but if you're aiming towards an equality of outcome, that everybody has the same opportunity of outcome.
I'd go back a step a bit and say that they would be afforded the same opportunities and supports.
So the fella from St. Fintan's and Sutton has the same opportunity and support as the fella coming out of Uritch or the girl coming out of Uritch? No.
If you had two people starting at two different places, you would support them that they would arrive at the end with the same potential.
The same outcome, yeah?
No, the same potential. What happens after that is up to them, is up to society. The outcome for me is what happens after that.
For me, when I'm doing a report, right, for work and it says, what will the outcome be? How would I know what the outcome is going to be? The world could blow up tomorrow. So it's
like an aspiration.
It's an aspiration, yeah.
Yeah. But then
So when I say opportunity of outcome, the outcome is aspirational, but it should be equal.
But also Fredo and Fintan are being dropped into two different worlds after they got, say, their qualification. So where does that support end, or does it end?
Yeah, I don't know.
And that's what I'm saying. I don't know either. So I'm not stamped on that going, oh, no, this is the way I think, because I don't know where it ends.
I don't think you should hang your coat on anything like that. I think we should be always trying different things, and society changes and opportunities become different and outcomes become different. So I think it's a forever moving barometer, So, but I do think for me, I'm in college. I'm in fourth year, in college now, part time, and I've had to have more support than others, in certain areas. I haven't been diagnosed, but I'd say I'm dyslexic to some degree.
That's not got to do with your socio-economic background, though, is it?
No, and it wouldn't have been the norm for me to go to college where I was from, or the people that I hung around with. Can't think of anybody that
So the culture in your community wasn't to go to college,
yeah. Whereas a lot of people in other communities that I know, I would have met lots of youth workers when I was a kid from the country or something like that, and they all went to college. They had on being to college. Whereas that wasn't the norm for me, So I went late in life, and I'm glad I went. Yeah, I think if anybody is interested in doing anything and it involves college, go for it. And it will cost you money. If you're doing a part-time, it'll cost you money. An example is the government gave $1,000 off everybody's fees this year, and I applied for it, and he went, no, that's for full-time graduates. I wasn't entitled to it. So that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about, you know what I mean? I'm part-time, I'm trying to do it, and it's not equal, you know what I mean? There's all hurdles and all kinds of different stuff going on. And I just think you have to really push through that. For us, I think we have to push a little bit harder ourselves to achieve the outcome. Now, the outcome for me, people say, it's only a piece of paper. It's not really. It's an experience, you know what I mean? And the experiences of education and learning is very satisfying, If I had any regret in life, is that I didn't do it earlier in life. It is what it is, and I am where I am. I'm in the moment, and it's happening, But I would encourage anybody that has an inkling to want to do it, go and do it. And I'm not saying that the outcome will be that Finno, is it? And
Fredo and Fintan.
That they end up in the same pub or anything like that. I'm not saying, I'm not sure about that. You know what I mean? I'm not sure.
In your communist utopia, do they?
Oh, in the communist utopia, everyone is just has the same opportunities, and not everybody's the same. Everybody's wearing the same clothes. Now there was one communist utopia that looked everybody wore the same clothes. Now I'm not saying that people are different, but I do think that everybody should have an equality of outcome. Yeah, that everybody gets the teeth looked after, their health looked after, their
so
education.
I'd be interested in that. There is an Ireland that's possible, where the roads are maintained properly, where the schools are run properly and similarly across the board to a high enough standard, where the hospitals are free and available for whatever you need, where the policing is decent, where the fire service is decent, where the rubbish collection is decent.
You're starting to sound a bit like a communist thing.
I don't think that that's communist. I definitely don't think that's communist, because I think you should be able to go into town and buy whatever fucking DVD player you want, or whatever car you want, or wear whatever wristwatch you want. So I think for me, there's a balance. One extreme is the communist, where we all wear the same bleeding grey t-shirts and we all eat the same food and we all meet in the same bars. I think that utopia, I don't aspire to that utopia. I'm not interested in that whatsoever. I'm interested in a place where the basic stuff that we pay our taxes for is run properly. But then we also have, you know, you want to go skiing and bleeding the Italian Alps twice a year, happy fucking days, go and do it. Does that make sense? And if you want to pay for private health insurance or your €650,000 gaff, you can go ahead and do it. But let's get the basic stuff right, like the social housing, like the social schools, like the social hospitals.
What you're talking about is basically what Irish politics is, right? That's what you're talking about. That's what it is, you know. But it's just, it doesn't work in certain ways, like, you know what I mean? It doesn't, like, it, because the likes of Fine Gael want health to be privatised, because that would suit for their mates to become more wealthier. And when I say that, their mates, that sounds a bit, but for their group of people, you know, they would do better. Whereas for me, I would say a doctor and a bin man or a bin woman, they're both working, you know. One has skills in brain surgery and eye surgery, and one has skills in getting rid of our rubbish. Both necessary. So all work to me is equal. So the outcome for everybody should be the same. If you work, wherever that is, you know.
So everybody should be on 60 grand a year.
That would certainly even things out a bit, yeah.
I like the entrepreneurial spirit, that energy that you get in businesses, that curiosity, that research and development stuff.
But that's all over. That has been all over. I mean, look, you look at the Russians were the first to get spaceships and all that kind of stuff, right? Look at in China, like, you know what I mean? It's all over the place, like, so that's not exclusive to capitalism, you know? Innovation and all that kind of stuff.
You know what I'd like? I'd like to sit down with somebody who knows a bit more about this, because I have a kind of understanding of it, but it gets fluffy and vague at the edges.
Yeah.
And the edges are interesting.
Richard Boyd Barrett. He has a good understanding of it.
Yeah, I seen him shouting outside the Dáil a few weeks ago. It was fucking...
Yeah, he's passionate.
It was really interesting.
Let's bring him in and let's invite him in. He's a good bloke, like, you know.
And who would be the opposite of a Richard Boyd Barrett?
Well, somebody like man Rock, who used to be around here. He's an interesting character. He's a Ballymunner.
No Rock,
you know. He would be the opposite, yeah. But a nice guy as well, you know. No Rock's a nice guy, you know. So let's bring them in and talk about it.
So come here, what else did you observe when you were in Alice Springs?
Oh, loads.
You were saying earlier on, before we start recording, about some of the stuff was none of your business.
I think for me, and that's not about Alice Springs, that's about me. You know, the way, you know, we observe different, like I lived in a house, in a Muslim house, right? And they prayed 5 times a day. And the house was very quiet. There wasn't music in the house. There wasn't an awful lot of TV or that kind of stuff. Like, you know, it was a very quiet house. Those kind of things were foreign to me. You know what I mean? They were different to me. Like, and so then there was practices amongst different people that I kind of was like, don't like that. And then I was like, yeah, but it's none of my business.
Give us an example of that. What are you talking about?
Some of the rituals of the Aboriginal people would be quite, would be ancient, and I would kind of, when people were talking about them, I was a bit kind of taken aback. But again, that's not really for me. It's not my culture, you know what I mean? It's not my...
What type of stuff?
Circumcision and stuff like that, you know. But again, a lot of cultures have circumcision as, you know, as part of their...
You were also saying earlier on that was in Aboriginal culture there was men's business.
Oh, there's men's business and women's business. And again, I thought I wouldn't be able to cope with that. They're able to cope with it. They've had it for 30,000 years. Yeah, and they deal with things, you know, men will say, well, that's not our business, that's the women's business, let them deal with it. And the women will say, well, that's not our business, that's men's business, let them deal with it. And it's just, you know, you'd have to look into it more. I was only there for 6 weeks, I don't understand it. I didn't study it, but I do understand that they have lived that way for 30,000 years. And who am I to say, no, that's wrong. We have to have it this way. We have to have it my way. Because I'm not so sure that my way is the way. You know, I'm not so sure that the way I've been doing stuff or the way I've been living has been terribly, amazingly great, you know.
What way is the way?
I don't know. I think that's the journey I'm on. I think that like I've often thought about the person who's dying a half an hour before they die and they know they're dying and they start to remember, Jesus, that didn't mean anything, you know?
All of those porcelain dolls I had in the front window.
Maybe. Or where will those porcelain dolls go? Or the house that I built. You know, Damo has a song, it's a kind of a poem, and he says something about, you know, when he passes all the kind of the posh houses on his way into town, and, you know, money doesn't call, like, you know what I mean? Having all this wealth and having all this stuff and
The artifacts.
the artifacts and all that stuff, right? Having all that, right? What does it mean when you're dying? You know, when you're going to pass, like, we will all pass.
Alan Watts talks about a porcelain world.
Okay.
We believe that it's this solid world here that we're in form, and all this stuff is the important stuff. You know what I mean? Like the house and the car and the relationship and the wristwatch and the holidays. And
Dan, I have that. Like, you know, for me, when I do my gratitude in the morning, I am grateful for the roof over my head and the diesel in the car and the soap and the warm water and all that kind of stuff. Like, you know what I mean? So I do.
But what he says is that we believe that that's the only one. And then as we get a little bit more, as we travel down the road a little bit more, we start to see that there's potential for other ways of looking at it.
Yeah.
You know, that we can start to think about the spiritual or the formless or where that person goes to once they leave here.
I'm not that interested in that at the minute. That used to occupy my mind. Where am I going? But the joy is in the journey, you know. I'm happy to be where I am now, and when that happens, I'll have a look at that then, you know.
So you brought it up, what's the thinking about the person half an hour before they die?
Well, I'm thinking they're looking back and they're saying, was it important that I was a Protestant? Was it important that I was a Catholic? Was it important that
I was a communist?
That I was a communist, that I supported Arsenal, or that I supported...
I fought with Fianna Fáil.
Do you know what I mean? You're kind of thinking, what would be the things that they would be thinking, well, that was deadly, like, you know.
And what have you come up with?
For me, well, certainly the work that I've been doing for the last 30 odd years, I've really found that very enriching for me, you know. That's a selfish thing, you know, but also that my involvement in the community and stuff like that, I've really enjoyed that. Friendships, I've tried to keep as many of my friendships as I can, you know.
Sobriety
has been amazing. And then that kind of that thing that you're talking about, that thing towards the spiritual thing, whatever that is. What did you call it?
There's the form here, and then there's the formless.
So the formless, I think I like that, you know, because I'm not so sure what that is. I really don't know what that is, you know. And
do the Aboriginals have any?
Oh, listen, everything. Like they have song lines, like, you know what I mean? Like, they don't have roads, they have song lines their communication is in song, like, you know.
Their myths and also their maps.
Their maps and all that kind of stuff. And like, they're very disturbed by the way they put rail lines through spiritual places and roads. Like, when you drive, like, I drove out to Uluru as a kind of a pilgrimage one of the days, and we were driving for 6 hours, you know, in a dead straight line. Like, it's unreal. Aboriginals don't do straight lines, you know. And there's a story about 9 people who walked out onto a straight road in the 80s. They hadn't never seen a straight road. They'd never met modern people, if that's what you want to call it, you know. And they had been living the life of their ancestors. And they were brought to Alice Springs, and they were brought to hospital, and they were checked. They'd never drank alcohol, so they didn't have any of those problems. They had perfect health, no diabetes, nothing like that, you know. And they were given the opportunity to stay in around that area they all became alcoholic and diabetic and stuff like that, you know. Whereas the life they had been living was amazing, like, you know.
Which is beyond both of the communist utopia and also the neoliberal utopia. It's kind of, it's almost a different frequency or different dimension than that world.
Now, I'm not pointing for that world, right? I'm just saying that happened, right? That there was, you know, like Australia's vast, like it's vast. You're flying over the thing and you're looking, it's unreal, like, you know. And a lot of Australians have never been to anywhere else in Australia. Like, I mean, I've been to a few places there, and that would be unique, you know what I mean? Because a lot of them don't travel around the place.
Yeah,
like,
when I was in South Africa, I've been to more of Southern Africa than most South Africans. The majority of South Africans wouldn't have travelled in Southern Africa as much as I have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember meeting bush people, sand bushmen, in a place similar to Uluru. It's called Tudzilo Hills in the north of Botswana, just north of the Kalahari Desert,
Right.
near a place called the Okavango Delta. And they were like those people. They didn't travel in straight lines. They wore animal skin loincloths.
Yeah.
They talked in clicks and clacks, and they had a kind of pagan view of the hills. The hills would be where their ancestors were. That's how they would communicate, going up into the hills.
So where I was in Alice Springs, there was a range called the McDonald's, right? And they said that was a giant caterpillar, and the gap was where that was chopped. Yeah, it's a very, very sacred place, you know. Alice Springs is a very sacred place in Aboriginal culture, you know. And a lot of Aboriginal people would live outside of Alice Springs, and they walk in the daytime, you know, to be part of the communities in there, and they'll sit around and they'll chat amongst themselves. Like,
Did you have any sacred moments?
just in Uluru, I had a very, very, I was kind of drawn to it for some reason, you know, like people saying, are you going to get down to Uluru? And I said, no, I don't think so, because I kind of feel it's not my ancestral connection, you know. It's not mine, it's theirs, you know.
But we're all one race.
Yeah, so I was drawn to it, and I did get an opportunity to go down, so I went down, and it's definitely a very spiritual place. Yeah, it's a very, very unique place. It was great. I had a great experience down there, you know. Lovely place down there, you know, like in the middle of the desert, like, you know, it's just bizarre, like.
You were telling me of an experience you had there about John.
Yeah, well, with John, our friend John Duffy died 9 years ago this week. He was an artist, you know, and he was always into art and art installations. And I went to see an art installation there that was fields and fields and fields of lights that were solar lights, like the solar lights you'd have outside your gaff that you buy in deals. But this artist had created them into an art installation, and there was hundreds of thousands of them. Like, there was about 9 or 10, maybe 20 football fields size. It was huge. It was, you know, the field of lights in Alice Springs. But what happened to me was, I get bored very easy, you know. Now, I was thinking about John going in there thinking, geez, John, I'd love this, like, you know. And then I get bored very easy. I was walking around and I was like, right, I've done that. I wanted to go home. And then just over the horizon, I started to see the stars. Because Uluru, there's no unnatural light there, you know.
No light pollution.
No light pollution there at all. So I had never seen the sky. And John Duffy, he was big into that. He was big into the sky and all that kind of stuff. So I had I just had a big connection with him there, you know, of his.
What do you mean you've never seen the sky?
I'd never seen the sky as illuminated as that.
The sky at night, like. Yeah, I got that when I was in the Kalahari. I got this, I think it's called the parallax effect, where you're looking at the stars and you go, oh, there's stars, and it's kind of like a backdrop, and then all of a sudden you realise, fuck, we're in the stars. We're on a rock floating in the stars.
No, you're right, and that's kind of what happened to me. I kind of had that feeling of looking at a star or a planet or whatever it was, and then thinking how small I am, you know, and how tiny, you know, and then you just have to let go of all, you know, will I buy an IKEA lamp or not, like, you know what I mean?
All the porcelain dolls.
The porcelain dolls, the fucking, You know, will I buy an electric car or a diesel car? All that kind of stuff just becomes so pointless. Like,
all the shit you said to your bleeding brother, gone.
Yeah.
What's your big takeaway from Australia?
Home is a place in your head. Like people were saying to me, do you miss that? And I was like, not really. And like, okay, so it's different, right? It is different. Like, because when I was a kid, if you went away to Australia, you'd probably be able to ring your parents once a month or something like that, you know? So, and then if you're younger, like I'm 56 this year, next year. So I don't have that whole connection with home or whatever, that kind of stuff. Like, you know what I mean? I don't have that kind of homesickness. I never got any of that kind of stuff, like, you know? Now, I did miss me gaff, you know, having the freedom of me gaff and all that kind of stuff. But I also loved living in one room and having to keep it tidy and having to stay on top of that and having to live differently, you know what I mean? And to have just different survival methods and laundrettes and fucking, you know, all that kind of stuff. Like, you know, I definitely missed, but it wasn't my spirit that missed that. It was my body missed those things, you know, that kind of everyday things, you know, being a certain way, and then it's changed.
Yeah, the stuff that you're used to, being able to just do it conveniently.
But I didn't miss chicken curry and fried rice and all like that, because there was dumplings there was different things, with different food, different stuff. And I think you're a bit like that as well. You like difference. I'm a bit like that as well. I want to try things and do different things. And
yeah, I remember bringing a couple of young people from Ballymun to Slovakia, and one of them was freaking out because he didn't sell king rolls in the shop, and he got homesick and he was fucking screaming for his mammy. I think travel broadens the mind and helps you understand that, yes, home is wherever.
The other thing that, like, I'm often reading about, there's a guy, an Irish guy, and I don't know what happened to him, but he walked from Ireland to Turkey, right? Just without any money, just to prove to his dad that people are sound, right? Initially, you know, the stuff that was coming back was that everywhere he went, he was looked after, you know? You know, I follow a few people on YouTube and stuff like that. There's a couple from England who are travelling across India, and the same thing, like their motorbike breaks down and two fellas appear with two spanners and a rubber band and they fix it for them, you know? And you kind of think to yourself, do I have to travel to learn that? You know what I mean? Or am I constantly going to live in fear that the world's a bad place, you know? The more I travel, the more like people are saying to me, they used to see me cycling around Alice Springs at 8 o'clock at night, right? Now that's kind of late there because it gets dark at 6, even in the summertime. And people would be saying to me, we seen you up around the town there on the bike. You want to be careful. And I was, careful of what? And they were like, well, it's dangerous. Alice Springs is dangerous. And if you Google Alice Springs crime, you'll get horrific stuff, like, you know what I mean? But I'm from Ballymun, you know what I mean? And I don't think Ballymun is unsafe. So Alice Springs was more safe to me, you know? Now, there was times, don't get me wrong, where I'd be walking home and I'd have to walk home by the creek in the dark, and it would be complete dark, it would be pitch dark, and I'd have a bit of fear. Of course, you know what I mean? You're thinking, you know, a snake or something could come up or whatever it was, like, you know what I mean?
Snaky cunt.
Or a snaky cunt coming out with a blade and the handlebar off a bike or something and give you a smack of it. But none of that, you don't see any of that, like, you know what I mean? And my lived experience is that people are more willing to help you than they are to harm you. I did see people freaking out, and I did see, but you see it all the time, you know.
People asking me about going to South Africa, would you not be afraid, and is it not dangerous? And one, no, I wouldn't be afraid, and two, no, it isn't dangerous, but yes, it is dangerous. It's as dangerous as
being in Blanchardstown,
as anywhere, as being in a fucking restaurant in Blanchardstown.
And saying that, right, I know that wouldn't stop me from going to Blanchardstown, and I think people die in car accidents every day. It doesn't stop me from going. I'm going to go out and get into the car now, like, you know what I mean? And I just think the joy is in the journey, you know what I mean? The joy is in doing. If we were to not do anything because of fear,
people die of embarrassment every day. Doesn't mean I'm not going to sing me song.
Give us a song.
On Raglan Road of an autumn's day, Me and Sparky are doing a gig called Podcast for Palestine on Sunday, the 28th of January in the Sugar Club. Tickets are about 18 quid, and what we're trying to do is raise a bit of awareness, raise a few quid, get people to consider, what's going on in Palestine.
And we've invited our friends Rory Ahern and...
So we're doing it with the Tortoise Shack podcast, Echo Chamber podcast, Rory Ahern. There's limited tickets. There's about 350. I reckon there's about 150 left. So get your ticket. They're about 18 quid on Eventbrite. Podcast for Palestine, the Sugar Club, Sunday the 28th of January. Come over and let's have a little bit of chinwag, a bit of chat, a bit of crack, a bit of kiol, a bit of uplifting energies for the people who are experiencing genocide in Gaza.
Listen, I'm delighted to be back. I'm delighted to be here. I did miss this, I did miss these exchanges, and I have recorded a podcast. I don't know where to put it out about my experiences in Alice Springs. Also, there was two young women, one from Cabardic and one from Ballymun. And there's a guy called Jamie Gorman who lives over there who does a lot of community work with Aboriginal people who are fighting the fracking industry, A great guy from Blanchardstown. Also connected with my new college. So I did record a podcast which I called For Dubs and Alice. Dean said it's inappropriate. But if people want to hear that, just let us know and we'll try and get it out somewhere, yeah.
Episode 19.
The Fresh Batch Podcast. Yup.
Here, fuck off, will you? Fresh, yeah?
It gets dark after 15 minutes. So 15 minutes ago, it was pure bright out. And now it's dark. It's just mad. I'm hanging out in the youth centre. The staff are deadly. It's just different type of youth work. Yeah, lots of Aboriginal young people. You never see, what happens is the young people live out in the communities outside of Alice Springs, and they'll come in. They might come in for a couple of days and they'll be here, and then you won't see them again for another couple of months, Same to schools. A lot of that kind of stuff happens. So I'm in good form. I'm loving it. Yeah, it's great. It's definitely a place I could settle in, you know what I mean? It's a lovely place here, Definitely different, but great vibe out here.